Thank you, sir. Good evening, all. Tonight we're tying a gold ribbed hare's ear. It's similar tie to what you did last week as far as structure, proportions. We will be tying the tail and the wing case with pheasant tail, and the body will be dubbing, and that's going to be something new for y'all. I think I'll switch over and we'll talk about well, let me talk about dressing it. Well, let me talk about dressing it, and then we'll talk about the dubbing. We mentioned dressing last week. What that refers to is the material choice. You know, I tie a lot of these with red thread instead of black, so that's one dressing. I did tie this one with a hare's mask dubbing that I made, and then I tied the tail with a pheasant tail with pheasant fibers. Let me show you that. And so when we talk about dressing, we're talking about your choice of colors and your choice of material. Pheasant skin. I really like this for tailing material. I mean, this guy's like 12 bucks and you can tie, I don't know, 500,000 flies or something. For this one tonight, I used this feather. Makes it what I thought a really nice looking tail. Pick a few barbs off like you do with your pheasant tail and tie it on. We don't know much about how the original was tied. We don't know who was responsible for it. It seemed to have come out of England in the early 1900s and as a derivative of a wet fly. For the wing case, I'm using what's left of this feather, and this is a mottled turkey. They're very nice for wing cases. The barbs hold together well. And let me switch over. As you can see in the back of the fly.
But just remember, Mike, just remember, they're going to be using pheasant tail for both the tail and the wing casing.
Right. Yeah, we'll get there. Thank you. And you can see it has, you know, pretty nice colors and such on the wing case. So that's the way I like to tie them. And so and that's one way to dress it. Tonight, as a lot of tyers do, we'll be tying the tail as you did last week with pheasant tail barbs, and also the wing case with that. And that works too. I've tied a lot of them that way. Another material some people use is this thin skin. I just have one of those fabric cutters, and I strip them out with a fabric cutter and a straight edge. And I used to tie a lot of them with these thin skin because they are very robust. You know, as Bob and I have both mentioned, these wing cases made out of fiber tend to fall apart. So your flies don't last that long. But I went back to another material we haven't talked about, is these light carrying resins where you pour the resin on and hit it with a light. So I can now make those a lot sturdier. So I've gone back to fibers and feathers from thin skin. So you just kind of evolve as you do this. And the point with all of that is that you see a pattern you like, you probably have something in your kits to tie it. You don't have to match the recipe exactly, just get close. And the other thing I started when I started tying is I noticed that a lot of these flies were, tend to be very spiky, and I couldn't duplicate that. And after I studied a while, I found out most of the people with very spiky dubbing flies that I liked were making their own dubbing. So I started to do that myself. This is a hare's mask. You can pick these up at fly shops. And this is what they basically did the original. This is this area up here is the guard hairs where you get your spiky. If I'm tying with one of these, I'll make my tail material here, and then I'll get my fur down in here. So down here for the fur, round on the edges for the tail, up in here for the spike. And the fur kind of helps hold it together, and then the spike gives it that nice shape. So what I started to do, I didn't have what everybody was using. They had these coffee grinders and throw their feathers in there. So what I did instead is I started cutting these. Throw a little fur in, cut, throw into a baggie. And then what I did have, oh, there's my bulb. I did have my bulb. So I just threw all that stuff in the bag. I get my bulb and I stir it up. Mixes it just fine. So that was my poor way of doing this, but that's a bag of dubbing I've been using for 5 or 6 years now. So, you know, a hare's ear, you make your own, you'll have a dubbing you like, you can blend it, get the colors you want, and you get a lot of it for the effort, effort and money. So with all of that said, let's tie one. Typically, I do these in 12 to 16. I don't tie them in 10s really. I tie 1 or 2, but not many. So what I do is I do the pheasant tail nymph 16 and 18, and I do these 12, 14, and 16. So that kind of covers my box for nymphs. There we go, looking for my thread. All righty. So it's your standard jam knot to the back. Okay, I'll just go ahead and tie this with a pheasant tail. So we don't want a lot of barbs. I don't like these 4 barbs. 4 or 5 barbs is plenty. And so as Bob showed you, you want to line up the ends so they're nice and straight, and then you can pull them off. And hopefully those came off. Yeah, look at there. So I can show that one off nice and straight. So I'm going to use that for my tail. As before, about half the body length. Set it. Anchor it down. Now, unlike before, we're not going to use any more of this. So this just goes in their waste bin. And now we'll tie in the ribbing, your gold thread. I like to use brassy on these, although I drug in a medium tonight. So, but I use brassy because they're a little smaller.
There should be some small or brassy to your left there, Mike.
No, I use this because the fly's so big.
Okay.
I use brassy at the 14 and 16s, and the 10s and 12. I use this. So I didn't mean to create confusion. Okay, so now we have that done, and now it's time for the dubbing. Okay, the secret of dubbing is you're not sticking it to the thread. Dubbing is like a felt where the dubbing hangs together. So what you want to do is spread it out, wrap it around the thread, and then spin it so it holds on to itself. And if you do that right, it's pretty slick. So it isn't wax and that sort of thing. It's learning to fan it out. So I have a clump about that big. That's probably too much, but. And now I wisp it out so it looks like that. Okay. Now I'm gonna put that around the thread. I can do that where you can see it. I can't. I wish I could show you, but what you want to do is put it and fold it on the thread, and then you spin it, and always keep spinning it in one direction. And I like to spin it from the bottom up. And there you go. The dubbing noodle's a little messy at the top. Hit that again. Okay. And then we're going to build the body. Go just about just past halfway. And then I like to counter wrap them. I don't know why. No particular reason. You can do the ribbing either direction. Okay, and now I like to try to tie it up under the hook. I'm changing So thread behind, thread behind, thread behind, so that I'm binding this down. Now I'll go back up a little bit. Now I'm going to helicopter it off. Now that since I have a rotary vise, I'll turn it over. And then to show you, I'm actually pulling down on the thread to keep everything steady. That helps it break pretty quick. Okay. Now I want to put the wing case on, so I'm going to go about to the middle of the hook. Now I want enough fibers, pretty good clump. And this is, now you see the kind of the problem with using these. Lots of people do, and I have too, but it's kind of a struggle. You want this pretty wide, half or so of the gap, right? So about like that. And you can see it gets thin on down. So we've got to use this part for our wing case. Okay. Which is pretty much what you did last week. So now I comb it out so it stays kind of flat. Put it in place. Don't go too far. Okay, it looks like it's on the back, not too far one way or the other. Now, actually, I stay up here, and what I like to do on this part of the dubbing is go back and then up back to the front. So that helps bulk up the front a little bit. As before, I spread it out. See, it's all wisped out. Fold it over so it's grabbing. It just makes a nice noodle. Okay, so I'm going to come back to the end of the wing case and back to front. That makes it nice and fat. I'll get rid of this. Kind of spread these out a little bit, comb them out. You see it's right flat down the back. I'm holding it across hand a couple to catch it. Pull it up, get a couple wraps underneath it. Looks good, just over a little bit. So I'm going to just bring it this way. There we go. And we'll couple more. We'll trim that off. Make a head. And we'll whip finish. And now, as we talked about, I like to use my light curing resin here, put a good drop on the back and a little bit on the thread. Oops, I got too much going here, but. And then these, you just hit them with a light and it cures it and you're all done. Gold Ribbed Hares Ear. Now, the other thing I like to do is kind of fan it out a little bit. Pull out some of the spikes. And so I take my no expense spared comb. There we go. You all ready to go? And you take your big hook, your number 10, get it in your vise. Now, since I know we're all experienced, do your jam knot and wrap it to the back of the hook and clip up your tag in. Then we'll wait there. Everybody's ready? Okay, thank you. All right, so we want to get like 5 or 6 of these pheasant tail barbs. Remember to pull them so that the tips are straight. What you want to do is make sure those tips are nice and together, and you pull it off. Measure half the hook. That's your tie-in point. And just wrap this down to the middle of the hook and clip them off.
Looks like we're ready, Mike.
All righty. Okay, now one of the things you want to do here is think ahead. You can counter wrap like I do, or you can wrap forward. It really doesn't matter on this fly, whatever you're comfortable with. However, if you're going to forward wrap, you want to tie the wire in on the back side of the hook. Because what that does is it gives you a little room to bring it under and over so you don't bang up your tail. If you just start counter wrapping from the far side, it'll mess up your tail. And likewise, I tie it on the near side and then I can counter wrap. So, you know, this is the time to decide which way you're going to wrap and tie your wire in appropriately. So I'm going to counter wrap and I'll put it on the near side. Okay. The dubbing winds up being a lot like learning to use your whip finish tool. Just a pain in the neck, but it's something you have to do. Great many fly patterns use dubbing, so this is one of your critical skills.
And as Mike said earlier, remember with dubbing, less is more.
Yeah.
You don't want to make that noodle too thick.
Yeah, and remember that you're letting the fur grab the fur. So what you're trying to do is wisp it out, fold it over the thread, and then when you spin it, it'll grab onto itself and bind itself to the thread. But it, you know, if you try to wrap it onto the thread, that's not going to work very well.
Looks like we're ready, Mike.
Okay. So before you get a little piece of fur, and I mean, it's not very big. It's like that. Oops. Okay. Not much. Doesn't take much. And I dropped. Oh, there it is. That's probably a little, not quite enough. It's like I dropped some of it. I get just a little more. You sort of get, once you have it wisped out, you sort of get a feel if you have enough or not too much. That piece, there we go. And see, that's wisp out, it's about that long. And that'll get me about to the middle of the hook. And you put it over your dubbing and then you kind of fold it on. And after you do that, then it'll just spin right up. Okay, and then once we have our noodle built, we're going to wind this up to the middle of actually just beyond the middle. Okay. And you can see that's nice and spiky. So wisp it out, kind of fold it over the thread and then spin it. And I like to spin it from the bottom of the noodle up to the hook, but I don't think it matters. Always spin it the same way. Don't go back and forth. Always spin it the same way. Less is more. It just takes so little dubbing. And you can always add more. If you didn't put enough on at first, go down a little ways, add a little more. It won't hurt anything. Or if you have too much, take it off when you get to the end.
Remember,
this is a nymph dubbing, which is a little hard to work with. We'll do some dry flies later, and that you'll find that dubbing's a little friendlier. The fine dubbing. Sorry, Joe.
and if you guys do have problems with your dubbing, they do make a wax that you can put on your thread that will help hold the dubbing, but it really isn't necessary.
Okay, looks like we're ready to go. And
Yep.
as I said, I'm going to counter wrap just because that's what I do. Doesn't matter. And when I get to the thread, I kind of pull it under. And I do, for whatever reason, I like to do this on the bottom. You don't have to, that's just what I like to do. So get a few wraps down the shank. That gets the thread or the wire. And then as I helicopter it over, I like to turn it and then hold the thread tight, and that makes this easier to do. If you keep helicoptering forever and it doesn't break, it's because everything's moving around. Okay.
All right, looks like they're ready, Mike.
Okay. So I'm going to back this up just a little bit, make sure I'm at the halfway point. Okay. All right. So again, now here we want a little bigger clump, maybe, I don't know, what have I got here? Got about 10. And so we're looking at is to have maybe half of that space in the hook gap covered for the wing case. And now it doesn't, it's a habit to make sure the tips are good, but you don't have to worry much about that. Okay, so we're gonna peel that off and you kind of comb it out flat. Oops, comb it out so it's flat. You don't want them stacked up one over another. And then when we put it on, we want to get that fat part there. Okay, couple wraps and make sure it's in the middle and straight where you want it, and yada, yada, yada. And we come up to the front and we'll clip off the excess. Okay, so get your wing case mounted. Excess trimmed and leave your thread hanging at the front. And this is really another fly you just have to have in your box. It's just so buggy. And imitates so many. It's just so buggy, they'll take it.
Looks like we're ready, Mike.
All righty. Okay, so now we're going to dub the thorax. As before, you just don't need very much of this. That's plenty. I'm going to wisp it out. Oops. Yeah, it's not, and then I'm going to fold that over the thread. And as I said, now it's folded over, so the kind of flip both ends. I come down the bottom, just twist it up. And then I'm going to wrap back to the wing case, and then I go this one too far. A little soft there. Pull that back a little bit. Okay. So get ready to mount a wing case.
Again, put that noodle on very sparsely. You can always do more wraps.
Yeah, that's really the trick. Fanning it out, thinning it out, folding it over, and don't use too much. I mean, you saw how little I used, and look at how bulky that got.
And most of you are putting it on too thick, just to let you know.
That's how it is when you start. It takes a while to get used to using a little bit. But yeah, when you think you have enough, cut it in half and try it from there. Like we're done. Okay,
Yes.
So now we're going to pull the wing case over. Make sure it's straight down the back. So I'm pinching the wing case and the eye of the hook. That makes sure it's where it belongs. And I'm going to cross wrap this a couple of times. And pull that back and put a couple underneath there. You standing up. Trim that off. And you make your head and whip finish. I like to do a pair of them. I don't pull that first one tight, real tight. Because sometimes when you pull them tight here, you break them like that. And if you did that before you had the first wrap, you got a problem. So do the first one, few wraps, don't yank it too tight, and then do the second one, cinch it up. Okay?